So I feel a little bit of a disadvantage with regard to this topic because living in the Midwest, I personally have never experienced a hurricane. But when we study the different things that are associated with this large weather system that forms over the oceans, you got their flooding, you got your winds, you got your tornadoes. It's just, it's intimidating. And so looking at the aftermath, words don't describe kind of how the human part of me feels. The science part of me thinks it's pretty darn exciting. But one of the things we're going to talk about is that hurricanes go through a cycle of starting out as smaller things before they're a full-fledged hurricane. Right before they're a hurricane, they're called a tropical storm, and they get their name. And so actually, this is a pair of tropical storms. They aren't hurricanes yet. They haven't been upgraded. But meet Boris, and Christina. And we'll talk about naming coming up here in a little bit. But one of the things, and we'll talk kind of about the structure of a hurricane, but you can kind of see that from an aerial view, from a satellite image, what the clouds look like, all the little swirliness. So what I've done is to take out a fair number of my builds, and so instead of kind of feeding you line by line, you'll see I kind of just put up a whole slide, and we'll just kind of see if we like that or not. But what we call hurricanes, actually there's a generic name called a tropical cyclone. And in our neck of the woods, and I have a map coming up to show you, we call them hurricanes, but in other parts of the world, they call a tropical cyclone a typhoon or just a cyclone. So, apologize for that build, but here in North America, actually, we have, you need a large body of water, and we have two large bodies of water, and a third, actually, if you count the Gulf, and the Caribbean. But basically, the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf, and the Caribbean is one set of hurricanes, and they have their own set of names. And then we are affected by some hurricanes that form and are sustained by the Pacific Ocean. But if you're living over here in Japan, notice that you call them typhoons. Tropical cyclones are called typhoons. Over here in India, they call them cyclones, as well as here in the southern hemisphere, Australia, and there to the west of Australia is another region where tropical cyclones form, and they don't call them hurricanes, they call them cyclones. So the world's deadliest hurricanes, and honestly, you may not, before you took this class, have ever heard of the Galveston hurricane. Galveston is a town there on the Gulf Coast, and back in 1900, you can see that there were many, many deaths, and I have some photographs to show you. So if you're ever asked on a test what was the deadliest hurricane ever, that would be the Galveston hurricane. Honestly, though, the costliest hurricane ever was Hurricane Katrina, as in numbers of dollars. And Hurricane Katrina was the third most historic hurricane where people lost their lives. Sorry, I should qualify that. This list for deadliest applies only to the United States mainland. So one of the things about hurricanes, I don't know if you'll get the sense when you're reading your textbook on this chapter, but it's almost like hurricanes have their own drive to sustain and to cause damage. I know they don't. But what you're looking at, the different colors represent the paths of these weather systems. And I say weather systems because I don't know if you can tell the dot, 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 dot. That is when that particular hurricane was not yet a full-fledged hurricane. It was a tropical storm. So you can see out here, for instance, let's go ahead and pick Katrina. Katrina is represented by kind of a purple here. And so that would be this line right here. And can you see that actually right here is where it turns from a dot, 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 dot to a solid line. There's where it was upgraded to a hurricane. And you can see the path of Katrina kind of coming in. And we call this recurving, okay, kind of the recurving. And I'll go ahead and tell you why it is. Actually, earlier in this course, we talked about a Bermuda high. It's one of those. I might not be spelling that right. Bermuda high. It's one of those semi-permanent high weather systems that forms over the Atlantic Ocean, and it's associated with the descending part of the Hadley cell. It's kind of where the Hadley and the Ferrel cell bump up. But that's called recurving, and it looks like they have looks like they're bent on destruction, I guess I should say. So the deadliest hurricane ever was in Galveston, Texas. Now, notice back in 1900, we didn't name them alphabetically like we do now. Remember Boris, Christina, then there would be a tropical storm that started with letter D for that year. Back in, I think that might have started in the 1970s, naming them alphabetically like that. But you can just see where all the structures, so many structures were leveled there. And we'll talk about something called storm surge. And of course, there's intense winds associated with the closer you are to the center of the hurricane. So this is pictures of the aftermath of Hurricane Ike. And you know, one of the reasons obviously that hurricanes can be so devastating is that they occur on our coasts, obviously, because they need the warm water, and then they come inland. But the fact that people build on our coasts, and historically they've done